You are on Dying of Exposure. This is the first episode of Composure with Darren Korb of Supergiant Games. My name is Steve, and how you doing, Darren?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Again, thank you for joining us. So let's talk. You've been doing this. You and I talked years and years ago for a site that now doesn't exist. Right after, like, relatively soon, within a year after Bastion released, and everybody who the hell you were, and you suddenly went from like a musician and composer and writer and intern to like a professional game composer, a full-time, more than full-time thing. So what's different now? What's changed? I'm sure nothing in the last 9 years. Your life's exactly the same as it was in 2010, 2011, right?
You know, the work stuff is pretty similar. The rest of my life changed a lot. I got married, I had a kid, I did all this other stuff, sort of life milestones, moved to California. But I would say that the work is, I approach it, in a similar way. I mean, I'm working, one of the biggest changes was when I moved to California, I started working from the office.
Oh, yeah.
So just as someone who had never worked in an office before, and I just sort of, my previous way that I had worked was sort of a little bit all the time.
Yeah.
And I had to get into a mode where I could turn on work mode and turn off work mode. And I could be efficient in the office and get work done and like get all the stuff done I wanted to do within the sort of allotted time I had that day, and then just go home and like not do work anymore.
Did that mostly, I mean, obviously the move changed it, but did that also change because you had a child?
Absolutely.
Or children? I don't know if you have more than one.
Just the one.
Just the one.
Absolutely. That was one of the biggest changes too, was just trying to, I couldn't just sort of stay up till 2, kind of noodling around with work stuff all the time. I had to, wake up at a reasonable human hour and and hey, I want to hang out with my kid when I get home. I don't want to do work stuff, so.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about that, because you mentioned the office transition. So Bastion was recorded predominantly in your place, in your closet, if I recall correctly. Yeah. So from Bastion to Transistor, to Pyre, to now Hades. Is Hades pretty much the first one that was like all office or mostly office, or is that just starting now?
That was Pyre.
That was Pyre. Okay.
Yeah, so I moved. We just begun Pyre. I did a couple of little experimental pieces on Pyre before we had moved, and then I moved right at the end of 2014. So we'd barely started Pyre.
Okay.
So the bulk of the work on Pyre was done in this sort of new me learning how to adjust to doing this stuff in an office.
Do you think that helped you? Because Pyre is a lot of music. Did that influence how much music you could create, or was Pyre always going to be this like larger project from the jump, where you're like, okay, I'm gonna have to like more than double what I normally do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I had a specific goal for how much music the game was gonna have, but we all kind of knew that we were trying to do something a little bit more ambitious that would probably have a longer runtime than the previous games. So I anticipated having to do more music, but part of my approach to the music was to try and implement it in such a way that it would be sort of immune to getting repetitive, if that makes sense. So we did some really granular stuff with stems and dynamic stemming, essentially. So different game states would create totally different arrangements of a particular piece of music dynamically as you went into that game state.
I definitely noticed it while I was playing. I think around that time, a lot of composers, indie game developers were like, "Oh, we can do this. This can be more cleverly constructed." What was there like a proprietary bit of software? Or was there a software that came out that made that a little bit easier for you?
Yeah, I mean, at least for me, Fmod Studio, the sort of getting a handle on that. I believe Transistor was maybe the first game that shipped using Fmod Studio, actually. Yeah. And that game, we started doing a little bit of that stuff in that game, and then really leaned into it with Pyre, and are continuing to do some of that with Hades. But I think the tools, that one, I mean, at least for myself, that piece of software is really understandable for somebody with a background in digital audio workstations.
Yeah,
because it's timeline based, and so everything is sort of horizontal, like.
Oh, good.
It all makes sense to someone with an audio background, right?
Yeah,
whereas,
anyone that's messed around in Pro Tools or
exactly,
Adobe Suite or whatever.
You kind of get the basics of how it works right away. Whereas the software that I started using on Bastion, and then on the other software that I began using at the beginning of Transistor before we switched to Studio was not as intuitive for me as someone who had come from that background and didn't have a background in game audio specifically.
Yeah. One of the things that really got me with Pyre specifically is with Pyre, because it's such a large piece and everything. With Bastion, you sort of like it very much sounded like one artist sort of coming up with different things that they could do to sort of match each zone.
Yeah.
And then Transistor, in my opinion, felt a bit more of a piece, where it almost sounded like you were like a single regular musician that was sort of hired to do something. And you're like, I'm hired because this is the music I make, which is funny because it sounds different enough from Bastion, where it's almost like you tricked the audience with it, where you're like, yeah, no, I just always make exactly the soundtrack music from Transistor. Yeah. I'm like the Daft Punk for this. Yeah, and they hired me. Of course, Tron hired Daft Punk.
I was very deliberately. I mean, for that game in particular, I don't mean to interrupt. I was trying to channel Red, and my thought was that all the music was music that Red had made before the events of the game. So I was really. That's cool that you noticed that. Yeah, I was really trying specifically to do that. That's awesome.
But with Pyre, you have to stretch so far on that to just like really explore as much space as possible. By the way, I really enjoyed Pyre a lot. It was a weird game. It was a weird game, but I was like, this is exactly what I was hoping. Because Bastion, Transistor, and even Hades kind of have a feel to them, and then Pyre is this weird sport game that really was a different swing. Transistor was Red. Was there someone inspiring for Pyre?
I think
or some different groups inspiring for Pyre, that kind of thing.
I think for me, in terms of the projects we take on, each one is a response to the previous one in a lot of ways. And so we wanted to make something where we could describe it in one sentence. That was one of the goal. Like Pyre was really hard to talk about during the course of development, just because it was not a thing that existed before we made it. You know what I mean? Just like,
or since, honestly.
Yeah, or since. Yeah, it's like a weird singular thing. So it's just a little more difficult to talk about something like that in a succinct, understandable way. So I think one of the things moving into Hades that was really important to us was, let's make a game that is something we can just describe to people and they'll be like, oh yeah, I get it, instead of like, I guess that sounds weird. So I think for us, that was a big part of why we went in the direction we did with Hades.
Definitely musically with Hades. So you guys are doing a game about getting out of hell, and so you're charged with a soundtrack that has to be related to hell. So of course there's distorted guitars. The audience would have. It's all flute music for Hades. That's all flutes. Discordant flutes. It's horrifying. But let's talk about a little bit about your process getting into Hades, because as much as each game you do is different, I was not expecting Hades' soundtrack. Not that you couldn't have done it, but I was like, this is real metal for for a soundtrack by a guy who's usually doing some stuff where it's like good and the acoustic guitar is still there, but like good acoustic guitar rhythms, kind of groove rhythms, and then you just slide into metal. So what was your process while you were beginning to compose, say, Hades right now?
Well, so the initially when I was experimenting with what the sound of Hades was going to be, I just went about acquiring a bunch of sort of Mediterranean instruments, as many as I could.
Yeah.
Um, so I picked up a balama and bouzouki and lavta and like a handful of other sort of Mediterranean things with a Mediterranean vibe.
Little bit of a personal question.
Yeah.
At this point in Supergiant's game, are those instruments that you buy yourself and just write off for taxes, or does the company just afford the instrumentation, knowing that you're going to get kind of expensive?
I think in this case, Supergiant may have covered those particular instruments, but it depends.
Yeah, it sort of depends.
Yeah, it just depends on how directly related to the stuff I'm doing for the.
I was wondering if you were
living
the musician dream, was just like, company, buy me every instrument I could possibly think.
No, I don't. I'm pretty reasonable about the asks. Yeah, I try to not try to ask for everything under the sun. If there's something I really think I'll be using a bunch for a project, I say like, hey, what do you think about buying me this? And sometimes, yeah. But anyway, I forget what I was talking about.
You were talking about buying the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I derailed you a little bit. The Mediterranean instruments,
yeah,
and everything, putting Hades together.
And yeah, so I mean, I picked up a few instruments and I started messing around with those, and just tried to sort of see where that would lead me, and what kind of stuff I could do messing around with instruments that were sort of unfamiliar to me, which I really enjoy writing on instruments that I don't fully play.
Yeah.
Because you don't have any muscle memory that tells you sort of what chords go when.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's all about your ears. And it's all about finding new fun shapes and maybe applying some of the stuff that you know on other instruments mechanically to that instrument, see what happens when you do that. Does it sound weird? Why? What's how do you have to adjust it? And that stuff's really fun. And so part of for me, the process at the beginning of Hades was just noodling around on these instruments that I wasn't really familiar with and seeing what I could do with them. And then, at the beginning of the project, we had like a slightly different creative direction, and it was still sort of ancient Greek mythology setting, but a little bit different than what we ended up with. And so it was a little bit less metal initially.
Yeah.
But I think once we made a little bit of a creative shift to the thing that we ended up on, the metal instantly, I was like, well, it needs to rock now.
It needs to rock.
Needs to rock. Yeah.
It is funny because so I was listening to what is it, audio fiction and sound control.
Control group.
Yeah. Listening to that, and it is funny because I think if you only know you as a video game composer, if you've only ever listened to this, you're like, okay, this guy, a lot of digital composition mixed with a lot of just like broad knowledge of instrumentation, and ability to play on pretty much anything. And then you go to the two projects I could at least find music for that were recorded for you, and I'm like, all right, rock music. That's what you normally. What you in a vacuum of just being in a band would do. Did you have some fun at least being able to integrate a little bit more of that? I would argue in Hades than say your previous projects that didn't really call for it as much.
Yeah, it's a ton of fun. I mean, making the music for Hades is a blast because it really allows me to lean into some stuff that I enjoy but don't always get to do for the work music, and so that's been really fun for sure. I kind of halfway through Pyre, I got an electronic drum set, and I've been using the electronic drum set to input MIDI, and because I don't really have a means to I still don't have like a proper studio, so I don't have a means to record an acoustic drum set well, essentially. Yeah. But I have really good drum sounds now that I can make it like a real sounding drum performance by kind of playing in the part and then messing with the sound in the computer. So I've been doing that a lot, which has been really fun. Getting to sort of just rock out and do some kind of stuff that's a little bit more ridiculous or a little bit more a little bit more intense has been really a nice refreshing change of pace for me.
Let's get a little crunchy, because initially a lot of the listeners in this group that are going to be most interested in this are also music producers and stuff themselves. Let's talk about let's talk a little bit of crunch about your like actual process. So you mentioned you have your drums. What, if you don't mind me asking, what in your preferences, what DAWs do you use? What interfaces do you use the most?
Yeah,
or kind of like your go-tos at this point?
Logic Pro is my DAW. It's been since Bastion. Bastion was on Logic 8. Now I'm on Logic 10 something.
Yeah.
And I love it. I mean, the thing for me about Logic that I really enjoy is that to get from idea to a pretty close approximation of that idea is like really fast.
Yeah.
Because of all the incredible presets and like out of the box plugins, like the sort of breadth of out of the box plugins that Logic has, really insane. And just tons of presets and stuff. So I don't really need to bother with amassing a bunch of external plugins and stuff.
Yeah, a bunch of VSTs.
Yeah, a bunch of VSTs. I mean, I use some, I have some external stuff, but the stuff that comes with Logic is so good, and I pretty much use that exclusively for the first 3 games. I still mostly just use that stuff.
Yeah.
So, I would say that's my favorite thing about Logic. I think the workflow is nice. I have, I've got my setup where I have, like, if I'm in the vocal booth, I have a little booth at work now. So it's like a little vocal booth where I record all the acoustic instruments and stuff, and I can.
Very nice. Logic
has, like a remote thing that you can put on an iPad or a phone, and you can control it remotely and do press record and all that stuff and go back. So it makes doing that. It makes I really appreciate the workflow of that for the way I work, just kind of by myself, for the most part. So that's really cool. Audio interface. I have an old Digio 2.
Yeah.
That I use. It's like a Digio 2 rack unit. And that's what I've had for ages, and I use that at the office still. And at home, I use like a little Scarlett Focusrite thing.
Right, because why pay more for something that's done so well for so expensive?
Yeah, it's just like I don't know. I don't need more than 2 channels at home. So and I almost never need more than 2 channels at work. I think I've only ever once used like 3 or 4 at the same time.
Well, if work ever expends itself to spend the hundreds of thousands to potentially millions of dollars for a studio that would require multiple channels, right?
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
No, I know. I have a dream. I have like my Sweetwater.com like wish list populated with
don't we all have that?
My full studio equipment that I.
That wish list that is just like, but I don't need any of this. I just really want it.
Yeah, if I happen to get a spare 40 grand or whatever, then I'd buy all the stuff in my wish list.
You're in a weird place, I think, as a video game composer now, like watching what's happened with Supergiant, because you guys are at conventions all the time. You're at gaming conventions all the time. You hit up PAXs. You were at Were you at MagWest for 2018? I know you were there for 2017.
I think I was there 2017. Yeah.
That was So you get to do something that a lot of game composers don't get to do, which is play your music live for people. And everything. So I watched the MagWest live set and everything, and I've seen you do that a couple times. And then this most recent PAX, you were there with the orchestra. Yeah. Which is crazy. Cool, I know you already talked a little bit about that and all of this stuff probably. But let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the difference first between playing in a live band in a set in like a bar or like a show place versus playing just you or like limited, like so you acoustic guitar and forgive me, I don't remember the young
Ashley
name. Ashley
Barrett,
Ashley Barrett. At like something like MagFest. What is the difference between that?
Yeah, so I mean, the difference for me, it's the difference between like a full band show and a stripped down acoustic show is that you can't hide behind anything. It's really intimate. Yeah. It's really exposed. There's just like nothing. If you screw up, that's all that's going on. So
yeah,
people are going to hear it. So in a lot of ways, those are sort of the highest pressure because you just have to not make any mistakes essentially the whole time, which is doable. It's just a little bit higher intensity. And when you're in a band, especially like I played bass in a band for a long time. I played different instruments in bands and stuff, especially bass. Like you can kind of
as a bassist, I already know what you're gonna say. You can kind of just
play whatever. Yeah, like like as long as it's not like totally wrong, no one is gonna notice at all. Like unless it's like really like just like a half step wrong, no one will know.
Miss that note. No one's gonna notice it. Yeah. I'm in a bar. The sound is terrible.
Yeah, it's fine. The bass is just mostly just sounds like mush anyway. So
direct in
live. Like, there's no way. Yeah, but no. I mean, if you're and even if you screw up, I mean, it's just a different thing. So I find that the intimacy of it is increased, and the sort of there is an element of playing a little bit under like a microscope because everything you do is just that's it. Everybody can hear all of the stuff that's going on.
Do you feel like the audience is obviously a little different because it's a different thing? Do you feel like the audience is like hella on you at conventions on top of you versus say at a live show where they could feel groove but they're also at the bar kind of thing?
I mean, I think there's a big difference in how into it people are now. I mean, before I'd be playing shows for people who like you'd like ask your friends to come and they'd reluctantly show up or whatever, they'd like, okay, I'll go to your band I don't like, but and you can only ask the same like 25 friends to come to so many shows before they just like
nah, bro,
go or like are not into it, so I think there's the biggest difference I would say in terms of the vibe of those shows is that when I play shows for the Supergiant stuff, people are there and they're into it and they're fans of the stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge difference. You have like a really, in general, I would say the audiences for that stuff have all been like super kind and really, really enthusiastic and just awesome to play for.
So something I get, and I think a lot of the anyone who's a performer that's done like convention shows, do you get a little bit of a not so much an imposter thing, although that is part of it, that imposter syndrome problem, but do you get a little bit of a feeling like you kind of cheat a little bit by doing those? Because like we've been in bands before. As a person who's been in bands before, struggle to get people out, and maybe you get lucky, you get a good festival show, or you open for someone that's big and their audience happens to really like you, but then you go to a convention and it's fucking like you're already like, god damn, I'm super successful, look at my audience.
I think in general I feel a little bit like I've cheated my way into people's hearts through games, like the music that I've made for the games, I don't know that people would have the same connection to it if they heard it in some other context, so in general I do feel lucky and like a little bit like I've sort of weaseled my way in there into people's hearts. But I mean, it doesn't, and it extrapolates of course to all the other aspects of this job and all the stuff that I do, shows and stuff like that. But that being said, it still feels awesome to play to a full enthusiastic room, just because if those people weren't already gathered at a convention, I probably couldn't fill that same room. That doesn't, that's fine. I accept that. It doesn't bother me.
They still go to your event, right?
Yeah.
PAX West is not for lack of content, right?
Yeah. There's plenty to do there. Yeah.
And then the other thing, and I find this real interesting. So like when Bastion came out, like it blew up. The game was really good. Your music was really good. Like everything was super interesting. It was in like what I would call the first big wave. It was part of that first big wave of like the Steam Xbox 360 kind of era of just like everyone playing these like little like super polished independent games. So just like this is the good stuff right now. And then so like but now you're years into that with Transistor and stuff like that. Do you feel like and Pyre and Hades? Do you feel like Bastion? Do you feel that the audience is still mostly attracted to that, or do you get people like myself that are just like every time you release a new thing, it's like a regular band releasing a new thing where they're like, okay, what's the music like on this? Or do you feel like it's still, or do you feel more like an '80s band touring casinos playing the hits?
I don't feel like that.
Good.
Because we really try to do something new each time. We're not still cranking out Bastion Part 4 or whatever right now. Like that's not what we're working on. So I think because we're not just kind of doing the same thing, as far as we're concerned, that really helps us feel, like good about what we're doing, and it feels fresh and exciting to us all the time. I think, of course, the scene has changed quite a bit since Bastion came out. There was, if you just look at the sheer volume of games released every single year, it's gone up and up and up and up every year since then.
It's absurd. No, like you can't go to a top 20 list of indie games anymore and see the same like again back in like 2011, 2012, be like top 20 games, and every list would be
They're
like
all
the same
pretty much the same, different order.
And now you'd be like top 20 indie games, and you'd be like, I don't fucking know what any of these games are.
There's so many.
I get updates on this stuff.
There's so many games. So I mean, it's definitely harder to make to be the sort of belle of the ball than it was in 2011. Because I just think the quality of the volume and quality of other stuff that is out there is enormous.
What you get for inspiring it. That's how dare you inspire people being like, wait, a small group of people made this?
And it's awesome. I mean, I love that, and it's amazing. I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, I think it's incredible, and we're just, if we're able to keep doing what we're doing and people keep caring about the games that we put out and buy enough copies so that we can make another game, then that's it. That's exactly what we want. So, if we can just keep doing this indefinitely, that is our goal. So
that is a question I actually had. You mentioned doing this indefinitely. So it's been a while, and these are not small projects to do this. This is writing an album when people perceive it because they get the professional version of it, right? Where bands go to a place for like 2 months and everything. But like for most independent musicians, it's like songs just sort of come to me, and like I might have an album where the songs have spanned over like 2 years, 3 years of creativity versus a game where there's like deadlines and you have to compose. And then you're paced by the developers as well, right? Like you get the levels, or like you mentioned with Hades, where it was mostly Greek mythology, and then it kind of shifted a bit in tone, and you're like, all right, distorted guitars are coming, and everything. Has this do you feel any exhaustion yet on this? Do you feel like this, or are you still pretty much in the same kind of place you were, say, like a couple years after Bastion, where you're just like head in, like full in on this, on it? I'm not asking if you're leaving Supergiant, but like just in general, do you still feel real good about this? Is this still exciting for you? Is it still something you're passionate about?
Absolutely. I mean, I get to, part of what is so exciting about what I do is that I get to do different stuff all the time. I'm technically the audio director at Supergiant, so I have 3 jobs kind of. So I do all the sound design, I do direct all the voiceover, and I do all the music. And so I, on a regular basis, get to do a lot of different things, and so none of them get stale for me. That's part of what manages to keep everything really exciting and fresh for me. Also, we're constantly working on, each project that we work on has been pretty different from everything else we've done. And that's really exciting creatively, to just always get to try something new, and try to just stretch my comfort zone as much as possible on every project, and expand that and see where that can go. And I think just it's just so incredibly satisfying to be able to work on projects with other people who I think are super, super talented, and to be able to like be constantly inspired by the people I work with, and work with people I enjoy their company. And I mean, it's a really nice, it's a really awesome work environment, and I don't want to, I would like, as far as I'm concerned, like this is it. I don't have like some ambition to go do something else. Like this is,
this is where you want to be for
yes, for
your
sure.
career.
And again, like even through this, it keeps changing and new opportunities come up, and I mean, just like that PAX show that we did, the orchestral thing, I never thought I'd do anything like that, even a few months before that happened. So
that was crazy. Let's talk a little bit about the orchestral PAX show.
Sure.
So how did that happen? How did it come about?
I think we wanted to do some fun thing for our 10th anniversary.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, maybe I could play a show with Ashley at PAX. That'd be fun. And I think it was Michael, our operations director, who recently left for another gig, but he one of his final acts at the company was helping put together PAX and everything, and seeing that through, and seeing through our 10-year anniversary stuff. And I think he initially had the suggestion, like, what about like an orchestral thing? And I was like, at first I was like, I don't think that's possible. I was like,
you're insane.
I was like, I don't know how to do that. I'd have to like pay someone to like do, like I'd have to, I don't know, man. Like, I don't, I think my initial reaction was like, and then I was just like, well, I guess I could just, chat with Austin and see, like, he does that all the time. Like, what kind of, like, what does that entail? How do you do that? So I chatted with Austin Wintory, and he's a buddy of mine, and we kind of broke down like, well, here's what you need to do. Here's, we'd have somebody do arrangements, and we'd have to figure out like what kind of ensemble it would be, what instruments we'd have, and why, why, and kind of broke it down. And the project seemed dead after a bit, actually, because we just, things weren't coming together, and we didn't think we could find a venue and all that stuff. And then we eventually reached out to PAX to see if, we could get a slot on their main stage for this thing. Mm-hmm. And when that came together, and then it was all of a sudden back on, and we were just like, all right, let's do this. So yeah, it was really an incredible sort of learning experience for me. And yeah, I'd never done anything like that. And yeah, so again, like I was saying, new opportunities always kind of present themselves, and I get to keep doing stuff that I never imagined I would be doing.
The teenager you working out things on the guitar was like, this is not a thing. It's not a thing, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, cool, Metallica played with a symphony. That would be dope one day. And then it happens in a weird way.
Yeah.
For viewers that don't know, Austin Wintory is like another video game composer. Most people would probably first have known him from Journey, I think was his. And Flow. Those would be the breakouts for Austin Wintory. So what I wanted to also kind of talk to you about is while you're working on these things, and you mentioned it a little bit with Transistors, like I'm looking for Red. Do you listen to a bunch of musicians in sort of and a bunch of music in the style you kind of begin to realize you're going for? Or do you kind of heads down, or is it different game to game?
It's different game to game. I would say for Transistor in particular, I did the most of that.
Yeah.
Where I was like really listening to for something specific. I was like looking. Once I kind of find it, then the sort of amount of listening decreases a little bit.
Yeah.
But on Transistor, I listened to it like when I was trying to find what Red would sound like, and what her music would be, and kind of what the vibe of the music of the game would be. I listened to tons of Imogen Heap.
Yeah.
Bjork. Listened to lots of Bjork, lots of Radiohead.
Yeah.
So yeah, just that, but mostly Imogen Heap was really like the I was like, I suspect Red would be like a cross between Imogen Heap and Bjork. You know, that was my sort of goal. You know, I not to say that I you know what the end result was something like that, but that's sort of where my brain was at when I was trying to.
It could knock you in a direction, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Where you'd just be like, okay, these are the things I'm listening to. So there's that. So in Hades, obviously you went and you got a bunch of instruments. You went for that Mediterranean sound. Then you got to add guitar. Have you had to stay away from music? Because of course, if we're talking about escape from demonic or dark or the sad side of afterlife, you know, you've got your Dooms, you've got your Darkstalkers, you got Diablo, you got a lot of D games apparently. Apparently D is games from hell. But do you have to stay away from that? Do you listen to it? Do you avoid it? Is there anything interacting, or does it just sort of exist in the ether and you don't really think about it?
I think I don't, you know, I'm not really thinking about it too much. You know, I mean, I was a fan of the Doom 2016 music a bunch. I thought that game had awesome music and you know, and I am doing like rock music in a game where you escape from hell, but it's, you know, I feel like it's
different.
It's pretty different. Yeah, that's my feeling, is that it's just a different thing. I mean, I like that stuff, but I'm not listening to it regularly or anything. I've played, you know, hundreds of hours over my life of Diablo 2, so that's just in there, you know.
Yeah, it's part of it. It's part of it.
It's part of it. And sometimes I'm winking at Diablo 2 a little bit more deliberately than other times. But
I hear it definitely in the songs. So so you work and you're kind of a jack of all trades, a Renaissance man. You can play the instruments, you can sing, you bring in vocalists. Have you either through Pyre or through Hades, collaborated aggressively with any other musicians? Do you bounce ideas off of them, or is it still just like a army of one kind of thing? Because you're not, for lack of musicians, you weren't in New York and you aren't in LA, so or San Francisco.
Yeah. I mean, I'm you know, I haven't really collaborated musically on the soundtracks themselves at all. More, you know, aside from having Ashley come and sing stuff and occasionally like work out some harmonies together and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's just kind of me by myself, you know, in the dark or whatever it is. I've done some collaborations. I did a little a cover of a tune from Tooth and Tail for that soundtrack. For Austin. And that was a lot of fun, but that's the only. And then for putting this show together, Austin and I've been collaborating sort of more closely on that, which has been fun, but nothing for an actual game.
Is that something you'd be interested in, or is it just not something that's very feasible due to how the games are made, kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem. I can't speak to what we do next. I have no idea what that would be or how we'd approach it or what, you know. But if it were similar to the things that we have done, then it wouldn't make a lot of sense, probably. The collaboration thing. I mean, I'm open to it, obviously, but
and I'm not like trying to wheedle in. It's like, and then hit up Darren Korb at the Supergiant with your music for some amorphous project in the future.
If there was some specific thing that I wanted to achieve that I didn't feel like I could achieve myself, that's when I would seek help. You know, basically. More, you know, that's sort of the short answer. But again, I'm really interested musically in trying to like do things that I don't know how to do.
Exactly.
Like, so I'm not sure. It would have to be like way out of my comfort zone.
So you mentioned it earlier, the evolution, the change, the much higher quantity of independent games, and therefore the music for those games, and everything. Is there anyone that you're listening to? You only have so much time in the day, right? You're a parent, you're a kid. A lot of people are like, oh, professionals, who are they like listening to? And it's like, between trying to make my own stuff, entertaining myself, and then like being with a family, and not a lot of time. But is there anyone that you're like digging into or digging right now, or any soundtracks that you've had, either obvious or not obvious? And we'll just assume Austin Wintory's in there, but is there anyone else that you're kind of feeling right now?
Well, you know, in my spare time, when I do listen to music, it is mostly not game music.
All right. What other music are you listening to then right now?
I've been listening to That Dog. They just came out with a new album for the first time in like, 20 years or something, and it's good. It's like feels like their old albums in a really fun way, which is like a lot of bands take a long time off and then the production's all weird and they all don't sound good anymore. But it's been pretty cool. I started digging on that 2004 like Dave Grohl metal album Probot.
Oh yeah. That's
which is pretty fun. I've been listening to the new Sleater Kinney record, which has been cool. I've been on a Joni Mitchell kick, just like listening to a bunch of Joni Mitchell. The Darkness came out with a new album, which is really good.
I did not know The Darkness came out with a new album.
Yeah, it's super good. It's super good. The album is called Easter is Cancelled, and the cover is like a ripped Jesus like tearing off the cross and like his like apostles like stabbing people and stuff. Like it's really
amazing.
Good.
Amazing.
It's really good. Gosh, what else? I went through like a Mr. Bungle phase where like they announced that those reunion shows and I'd never heard them before, so I was like, okay, I guess.
Oh, that's a gift. That's a weird thing to discover in now versus then. Because then it was like, there's a lot of weird super indie alternative bands. Yeah. But like now you're like, well, I'd find this on Bandcamp or Spotify or SoundCloud deep. Yeah. But you're like, this was a touring, like a professional band that filled mid-sized venues. You're really like, I don't know if that could happen now.
And I get like a really, I mean, I dug into it a little bit. Apparently this was not intentional on their part, but I get like a real Frank Zappa, like a spiritual successor to Frank Zappa. Is sort of how I feel about it. It's just like, it's so schizophrenic and so crazy that it's just like, well, the only other place I've heard anything like this is Frank Zappa.
Definitely. So before we get too short on time, obviously you're deep in Hades right now. And is this an ongoing project? Forgive me because I only have listened to the music that's available for Hades. I know nothing about the game. It's not on a console, so I have not played it.
Got it.
So I watched a little bit of gameplay. Is it out? Is it available?
It's in early access. Early access. Yeah, it's in early access on the Epic Games Store, and it's coming to Steam December 10th.
Yeah.
Still in early access, and then sometime in the second half of 2020 we will do a wide release for 1.0 and be out officially. So how's that impacting the music? Are you done? Does the music feel like it's pretty much done at this point? Are you still adding more and more to it? Like what happens with the early access versus say a product where you just like release it, right? Yeah, I've been adding music pretty consistently. Just every update, I've added music so far. I'm not positive that I'll be releasing a piece for this next update, but I'm working on some stuff that will come out later.
Is it how big is it by comparison to say the rest of your games? Because Pyre is obviously the biggest boy, but like the other games are all like hour and 12.
I mean, in terms of time, this one I think may have more than Pyre already. It's fewer tracks, but it's got a lot of like 8-10 minute tracks in this game. So there's fewer tracks. Pyre had 39, I think, but some of those were like 1 minute long. Whereas this one doesn't really have any minute long. I mean, it has like one really short track, but mostly they're pretty hefty. There's a big chunk of like 8 to 10 minute pieces. So yeah, I mean, I think in total it's going to be probably over 2 hours is my guess. When it's all said and done. I do have at least a couple more pieces I intend to make, probably, maybe between 2 and 4 more pieces or something between now and when the game comes out.
And so they can hear some of it. Some of it was online in an OST. Let me see if it was officially on. Write that down.
So we've got singles from the game. We've been releasing singles essentially as the game's coming out. So we have on our Spotify, on my Spotify, I have playlist of all the singles from Hades, which
Mhm.
I add to as a new one comes out. And then on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, we also have all of them available.
Yeah.
We're not releasing them for sale yet, just because we don't want people to like double buy the thing. Like we're just gonna wait until it's done and then we'll release it as an album.
So they can get the new Hades album, or they on Spotify or YouTube if they want to listen to it for free for now. And then it'll be released properly. Of course, all of the other soundtracks are up on Supergiant's YouTube and on Spotify. You can find them all over the place, Amazon, iTunes, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
And then one I forgot to ask this question. I'm going to ask it real fast because it's an interesting one. You're a game composer, right? And so what do you feel like in regards of people like covering, sampling, using your music? Because I'm both in the nerdcore scene, the chiptune scene. That's super common. What are your feelings about it? And this is not like a legal forgiveness for Supergiant being like, Supergiant blesses you to just steal their shit. Don't do that. But like, what are your feelings about it as a composer?
I mean, I think it's extremely flattering. I always think it's cool to hear other people's takes on my stuff, covers and all that. I've heard some really impressive things people have done with samples and stuff like that. I mean, there's all sorts of cool like remix, stuff that I've heard. I mean, that stuff is all really fascinating for me to hear. And it's all, essentially for me, it's just super flattering that someone liked the music enough that they wanted to go and either like learn it and play it and record it themselves, or chop it up and do something else with it, use it as ingredients for something inspiring to them. So that's always really fascinating to me. Okay, well, I wanted to get that question in only because it's something that kind of comes up in the modern culture a lot more than it used to. Sure. Even back when we were talking about Bastion, there were people immediately that were just acoustic guitar in front of their webcam, just fucking playing your songs. So I'm gonna let you go because it's been about an hour, and I want you to like enjoy the rest of your day. Cool. Thank you very much again, Darren Korb. My pleasure. Supergiant Games. Their website is Supergiant. It's supergiant.com. Supergiantgames.com. .com. Just type it into Google. You'll find everything that you want. And get that early access on the Epic Store. Don't at me about the Epic Store. Get the early and then it's coming to Steam if you don't like the Steam. A little more than a month.
In a little more than a month, it'll be on Steam, so that'll solve that problem for some people. And then for those of us, I guess for my own personal taste, is it coming to PlayStation? Everything else has come to PlayStation. Is it coming to PlayStation? Is it going to sneak up on there?
So we don't know exactly what platforms it's going to be on when it 1.0s, but we do know we intend to have it be our biggest launch in terms of platforms. We intend to have it be on as many platforms as we can, essentially.
The Nokia N-Gage.
We'll see if maybe there are different consoles by the time it comes out. We'll see, but we don't want to commit, but we definitely intend to be on as many things as we can.
That'll be cool. Well, thank you very much for your time. I'm excited to hear more music on Hades. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and thank you very much, Darren.
Thanks for having me.